Hey everybody, this is Jennifer Hilt. Thank you for joining me for my Kickstarter workshop, Mothers in Science Fiction and Fantasy. I'm not 100% sure why my screen looks this wonky, but we'll see if I can make that go away. Ah, okay, so I just need to make this first part. Hold on. Why does that maybe views? Wow. Hold on, guys. Sorry, I'm not sure why this part is here. There we are. Great. So as you guys remember, you supported me for the Kickstarter. Thank you so much. I'm super excited because the books are in and I'm going to start shipping this week. But thank you so much. It really means a lot to me, and it's been a very fun project to work on. So today we're going to talk about mothers in science fiction and fantasy, basically tropes of how those are used and twisted. And let's get started. As I know you guys all know who I am, but this is just in case you forgot. You can get a quick reminder. And the first thing I want to talk about is just an a recap of like what are the trope expectations for science fiction and fantasy that in general. So we're gonna have stories that have the MacGuffin, which is like a thing that people are searching for. We're going to have elements of quest in the stories, and we're going to have some kind of time-based element, which we call the ticking time bomb. So those are things that I keep finding again and again in fantasy and science fiction, and I just wanted to like reiterate those because we'll be talking about character tropes, but these are also just really important to keep in mind. Also, found family, huge in both of these genres, as you guys know. And then secrets and scars, also really important. So these are just like the 6 things that I'd kind of keep in mind as you go forward with your work with tropes. Okay, I love this quote by Flannery O'Connor. She's an American short story author from the mid 20th century. And I thought this was a really good quote to kick us off because it's really what this quote is really talking about, I think, is that she's talking about scars and secrets. And it's a really great reminder that even doesn't matter the age of our characters, to always be thinking back to like what are their foundations? What are things that are influencing them or have impacted them? And I just think this is a great quote. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is what roles does a mother play in the story? Who is she, and how does that impact her offspring independence? And so basically what I want to talk about is how a mother character, how she functions as her own character, and then also how she functions as she's in as we would think of traditionally think of a mother as how she functions influencing her other her children or her dependents. And this kind of idea is super interesting to me. I'm always like wondering how it works in stories, but the same idea of wondering how the character functions in that role and then how that as for that character, and then how the separate question of how they impact other characters. We could do this for anything, right? We could talk about this with siblings. We could talk about this with fathers. Twins would be fantastic to talk about with twins. There's really any friends. There's like any kind of trope that's with relationships, we could ask these questions. So I think it's just something to keep in mind as you guys are working on your stories, to be thinking about those 2 questions with the characters. But we're going to look at a whole bunch of examples. Okay, so I wanted to think about what are like 3 roles that a mother plays, and one of the first ones I would say is identity. She has her identity as a mother, and then also she provides identity to her offspring, so they would know, like, where they're coming from and where they are in the world. And a really great example of how important this role is if we think of the opposite. If we think of an orphan, one of the main struggles an orphan has is who they are. They don't know. And so that's one important role that mothers serve, is the identity of their kids, and also, like I said, their selves. And so, for example, one neat example of this is in the Witcher. The character Yennefer, she doesn't have the ability to have children. She unfortunately like had to make a deal and give that up to have her magical physical transformation. And her inability to become a mother is a huge part of her character arc. So that's an interesting take on the whole identity issue. So another thing that mothers provide is they provide protection for our characters. So that's a lot of mothers, that's their job, is the defender, and then the child receives that benefit. We can see how this gets twisted and provides story when, for some reason, that goes to the extreme either way, in that they are overprotective of the children, or they don't protect them at all. So that's another role that mothers play. And then the third one is this idea of providing emotional support. I guess I could have said, but the idea of love or nurturing. And again, if we look back at orphans as kind of like the shadow opposite of this, we can see how they're impacted by not having these things, and that usually is the propellant for their journeys. Okay, one of my favorite mothers, Mrs. Coulter from the Philip Pullman's fantastic Golden Compass. If you read my first trope thesaurus, you know that I am just like a complete and utter fan of this series. And he just was one. This was one of the books that opened my eyes to all the tropes that are in it that I didn't realize. And what I really like about Mrs. Coulter is how incredibly complex she is as a character, and that she's a powerful woman, that we don't even know that she's the mother of the main character until into the story, and she has her own plans and her own desires. And also, let's hit my next slide. And how that works with and against her relationship with her daughter Lyra. So I was going to use goal, motivation, and conflict to kind of just give us a sense of where we're going with this. But so Mrs. Coulter, she knows that Lyra has these abilities, and she wants to help control them. But her idea of help is very, very controlling, and Lyra pushes against that and doesn't want to be controlled. And then Lyra also is on one hand, she's really attracted to Mrs. Coulter because she's very interesting and cool and savvy, and she goes to all these places, and she's going to the north. And but also Lyra is afraid of her and senses that there's danger, and that controlling aspect of her is something that she needs to be wary of. And twice Lyra runs away from her, and her mother ends up drugging her and recapturing her. And what I think is kind of interesting about these characters is, I think Mrs. Coulter, she doesn't see herself as a villain. She sees herself as she's doing this work. She's very invested in that church and the rising hierarchy of it, and the research with the daemons. She doesn't see herself as a villain. She sees herself as doing the right thing, and she's trying to protect Lyra. It's just from Lyra's point of view, we see that she feels afraid and constricted, and basically, in danger. So this, not surprisingly, the Golden Compass has just a ton of tropes, and so I've just listed some of them here. Um, this is just to kind of give you a general overview. And yes, the Golden Compass has secret baby, as you know how much I love that, and that we find out that Lyra is the secret baby of Mrs. Coulter and Lord Asriel. So I was just going to talk a little bit about the relationship between Mrs. Coulter and Lyra, as their kind of relationship goes through changes. And they start out as kind of friends. She hires Lyra as her assistant as a way to get her away from the college. And then Lyra hears that she has some plan to take her away. And so they become enemies, and Lyra runs away. And then they kind of reunite again later after she kidnaps her again. And there's that whole thing, the whole what am I trying to say? The whole pushing against each other with family of, she's trying to protect her, Lyra doesn't want to be protected, and Lord Asriel tells her you can't control her, she's a free person. And so there's that whole element of the family and the politics of the dynamics between them going forward. So that's a very, I just think it's a really interesting relationship. And it's one in where we don't see her providing the kind of protection that we normally think of um, with mothers, and so that's a neat twist on that. And instead, Lyra's protection comes from the armored bear and the Texan who's helping her get to the north. Secrets and scars. Okay, Both of these characters have great secrets. Obviously, I just talked about the whole secret baby thing, and Lyra didn't even know that she finds out from the gypsies. That's her mother. The scars would be very much that loss of family um, that Mrs. Coulter realizes she's never going to have a family with Lord Asriel and Lyra, that they're just too independent and their interests are too divergent. Also, the scars in terms of the whole procedure to separate a child from their daemon causes a physical scar in them, so that's really interesting too. So and then Lyra has plenty of secrets of her own in terms of her althiometer and her quest to get to Roger, and then her own power too, where that she has these special abilities that the witches have picked up on. Okay, another interesting kind of mother character. This Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. You guys have probably all heard of it. Great book, great movie. Um, I was going to talk about how Miss Peregrine and Jacob, how they have a kind of this kind of mothering relationship, and what are some things about that. And Miss Peregrine is an interesting example because she's very much what we think of as a mother character in terms of the protection and the nurturing, and so she's really, her whole identity is really wrapped up in keeping these orphans safe in a time loop from these kind of the hologhasts characters that are like somewhat like not stand in for Nazis. So her goal is protect children. Motivation, I would say duty. I don't know how I skipped that. And the conflict is she's captured by the antagonists, and the children are then vulnerable. Jacob, he wants to help the orphanage children when he finds his way back into the time loop. He promises to help his dying grandfather, and the conflict is the Hologasts are just more powerful, and he finds his own power along the way. Tons of tropes in this book too, not surprising. Really interesting use of time travel, and just a great, really creative. I just loved the different abilities of the children, and of course, Miss Peregrine herself was pretty awesome with the shape shifting and able to control time. So, but these are just some of the tropes that are in there. And these were again, talking about kind of how the relationship, or where Jacob starts out, where he meets the other children and Miss Peregrine, they become friends, and then found family, and then eventually he becomes part of the protector, and they're going to go rescue Miss Peregrine and bring her back. I think that she, has a stand-in for like the more traditional roles that we think of as a mother. And so she's kind of like on one end of a spectrum, and then you'd have somebody like Mrs. Coulter on the other in terms of like their goals and their ambitions. Scars and secrets. So we don't know about all of Miss Peregrine's abilities right away, and so we learn about that. And the scars are obviously, really interesting in terms of how Jacob has this ability to see the hologhasts, which is inherited from his grandfather, and then the kind of scars from the war and how that's passed down, and how the children are still living with that, and how Jacob struggles with that himself, even though he hasn't lived in that time period. Also, great use of secrets with hidden identity, where the psychiatrist, and it was the bus driver, and I think also the bus driver, psychiatrist, and the lawn guy. Those are all secret bad guys that are keeping it. We're keeping an eye on Jacob and his family. I love this one because this shot, which the resolution isn't very good, so I'm not sure what I did there. But what I love this is you have all three, or well, not all three characters, but almost um, in there in terms of. I was interested in Queen Calanthe, how she functions as a protector of her granddaughter when her daughter in this picture dies, and the whole idea of the law of surprise, as you guys know, I just think is just a great world building concept, and I think it really helps make this story fantastic. But basically, the queen has her daughter and son-in-law have died, and so she has the protection of her granddaughter, who has this power to basically, stop time. And they're being attacked by, overrun by this other rival kingdom, and they want to take her granddaughter. She knows that she can't protect her, yet she's been jealous of Geralt taking the granddaughter away because he promised he would protect her. So she's thrown him in prison. And so when this attack comes, they try to get him. He's separated. He should be able to protect Ciri, but he's separated from her, and he's so separated that he doesn't even know. He knows he's protecting the child, but he doesn't even know it's a female. So Ciri escapes on her own as the army's hunting her, and she's trying to find her protector and get to safety as he's looking for the royal child that he's protecting, and eventually even learns it's a female. So it's really interesting in that the queen does what she thinks she's doing best she can to protect Ciri, but actually ends up, hurting her initially because Geralt can't find her. And I just think the queen as a mother is a really fascinating character because we see her as she's like battle weary, and she comes back and she's covered in blood, and she's just a very interesting, powerful person, and definitely very much the alpha. So I really enjoy her character a lot in that first season. So, and tons of tropes in The Witcher, not surprising. I think it'd probably be easier to see what isn't in there, and I don't even know if they I think over the course of the series they use every trope that there is. So first, the interesting thing when we talk about the identity and protection and the nurturing and loyalty, nurturing and love, is that those are the things that the queen is providing to Ciri. Then when she can't provide her, those things are transferred to Geralt. And what's a great twist on that is he's somebody who is sworn that he doesn't get involved. So now the thing that he said he's never going to do is like his primary thing because of the law of surprise. So that is just a story concept that is so well embedded and baked into the story. I really have a lot of admiration for it. So this here was just kind of about talking about the queen and Ciri, of that she's her protector, and then she feels a rivalry with Geralt, and then eventually he and Ciri form a found family. So many secrets and surprises in this. There's about, the the law of surprise, the fact that the identity of Ciri, that she's a girl, and the the scar of her losing her parents, and the scar of her, losing the queen. Also her ability, how that comes into play. And of course, Geralt himself, his scars in terms of like always being a loner and being ostracized by society, and he doesn't really have friends, although we see he picks up his found family along the way. And the scar of his love for Yennefer, and yet their unrequited love and inability to kind of get on the right track. Fourth Wing. Okay, if you guys, I have written about this in my Substack, which is free, so surf over and check it out if you want to hear more about it. But I'm going to specifically talk about the general, who is the main character, Violet's mother, and Violet, who is the main character of the story. And what's interesting about this is, again, we have a mother character who has a very formed identity outside of being a mother, and this is like something that we find out like page one. So that's forms an interesting part of the characters, that she's this general. She can't do anything to influence the daughters going. She's kind of pushing the daughter to go into this war college that she's not really equipped to do, but yet she's also like, I can't help you, you're on your own. I won't be able to talk to you for a couple years. And Violet was not prepared to go into this more physical militant war college. She was prepared to go to a different one. And there's no kind of middle ground. There's a series of tests, and if you don't pass the failure of passing these tests is death. So it's really an interesting setup. And her sister appears also in the early pages where she's defending Violet and pushing the mother not to send her into the pilot program and to, let her go do the scribe thing that she was going to do so she'll be safe. So it's an interesting, but the mother is very unrelenting about this. So it's an interesting setup of like with Mrs. Coulter, she has her own identity, she has her own ideas. She feels like she's doing the best thing, and she believes in Violet when her sister is really just more worried about her that she might die. Tropes and Fourth Wing, like I said in my Substack, I counted 11 in the first 3 pages. And so these are just kind of, there's more, I'm sure, that I have forgotten. But just to kind of give you an idea that it also is just completely packed with tropes. And what's interesting about Fourth Wing again is the idea of family and how that uh, is linked with politics, and somewhat similar to Golden Compass and Mrs. Coulter. There's all the politics of the War College and this kind of and the war that they're having with the other kingdom, and that the mother, we find, doesn't becomes at the end of it there, it looks like she's the antagonist, that she's not been honest with the daughters about things that have happened with the other members of the family who've her son and her husband who've passed away. So there's a real change in the family dynamics with those two, with the mother and Violet. Plenty of secrets and scars in this story too. Like I said, there's really, the whole book is really a gradual revelation of various secrets. They have a good, and there's a really nice initial tension set up in this, in that Violet's family, her mother is responsible for the death of the boy she's likes, whose name escapes me. I want to say Xander. At the her mother's responsible for the boy's brother's death, and in return, his family is responsible for the death of Violet's brother. So as these two gradually fall in love, there's this conflict of their families hating each other, kind of the Romeo and Juliet, I guess, setup you could say about that. But that forms a really nice base with why the families have great difficulty with each other. And scars, again, there's the death of the family members, and we really see Violet mourning her brother. And there's a sense that the mother is, of course, very sad at the death of her son, but she's also very much puts on this face of the general, and conscious of her identity as somebody who's leading the war college. So I think the mother is like really interesting, and I wish there was more of her in the first book. I haven't read the second book, but I'm pretty sure that there is, and I'll have to check that out. So now we're going to talk about some of the characters we're going to talk about some sci-fi. And Expanse, huge fan of it, both the book and the series. This is the character Naomi, and what is interesting about Naomi is we don't even know she's a mother till, like, if you're talking about the series, I think it's probably the second or third season, but it certainly didn't come up in the first, I remember. But anyway, we find out later that she has a grown son, and she has a lot of guilt over leaving him, and he's with her ex-husband, who's basically running a terrorist organization. Her son's a young man, and she finds out that he's been the father has sent him on some missions, and now he's responsible for killing some people, and so she's really wanting to reunite with him and get him away from the father. And so you have this the triangle of the family dynamics, of the tension of how that all happens. But it's just very interesting because a whole bunch of tropes in that, in the Expanse. But Naomi is a very independent character. She's a technical whiz in terms of all kinds of engineering, and she has a lot of loyalties to her past and the other Belters. And so she's a very interesting, fully formed character, and we don't even have this sense of her being a mother until much later when we meet her. So I think it was like a nice reveal of how they did that. In her relationship with Philip, they start out as enemies when they are reunited, because the father has told his son many things about the mother. Then they become friends and allies, and then eventually they kind of she and Philip reunite, but then she has to escape again. And so many secrets and scars. Again, in this, we didn't even know there was a whole kind of secret baby. We don't even know about that with her. Um, then I think they had thought she was dead for some while, and the scars that she really feels the loss of her son, and he really feels the loss of his mother, and that separation has really impacted both of them in very deep ways, and that they keep trying to reconnect, and they keep running against the very powerful father and those competing forces. Okay, this is my favorite. I think this is probably one of my favorite stories, and I don't know if I hope this is still on HBO, but Ridley Scott was one of the producers of this Raised by Wolves, and I just thought it was absolutely fascinating, a little bonkers and weird, but super interesting because so much of it is about nurturing and motherhood, and it's basically the story of aliens, Earth collapsing, and so aliens being responsible for taking human embryos to far-flung planets and raising them in hopes of repopulating the human population. And so the alien who literally is called female in that picture I showed you, literally called Mother, she her job is to protect and guard and nurture the human offsprings. And they start out with 12 and only one is left, the boy we saw in that picture, Campion. And she's a very interesting character because somewhat like the Pinocchio and the like Barbie movie and the Poor Things that we're seeing now, her character as as non-human AI kind of robot only wants her greatest wish is to actually give birth, be a mother herself, produce her own offspring. And so she pours as much of her love as possible into Campion and his deceased siblings, but she really, really has this tremendous wish for herself. And we see that that wish becomes fulfilled in a very bizarre, twisted way, that she's somehow impregnated by her creator and gives birth to a snake baby, which was pretty far out the whole thing, but really just so interesting about that ways of parenting and the idea of identity, love, and um, identity protection and love, and that she herself, her identity, she is a former weapon that has been supposedly de-weaponized and sent on this journey, and but yet she's still like a sentry, and she will go out and fly around and make sure there's nothing with impacting encroaching on the borders to hurt them. So really interesting series if you get a chance to check it out, to see how that character really takes what we think about nurturing and love and identity, and it kind of plays with that idea. And the great foil for that is Campion, who there's a lot of things, there's a lot of comparisons I think we could talk about with the Mrs. Coulter and Lyra, and the mother and Campion, in terms of them really wanting, she really wants Campion to be this leader of the atheists, and he's not so sure about that. He really wants to be with other humans. He's more drawn to monotheism when he meets other settlers on the planet. And so this sets up a really nice conflict between the two of them with their goals, and his basically wanting to be free of her control. So we can kind of see again and again this idea of like the overarching idea of like, oh, a mother's love, kind of, too much, just right, not enough, and how that can impact our characters, and how that works for those characters too, um, how that affects their identities. Raised by Wolves, oh yeah, again, lots of really neat um, trope use in there, and then there's it's interesting because there is another character in there who becomes a mother against her will. She's raped on one of the spaceships. So her journey to becoming a mother, and her relationship with the android mother character is also super interesting in the story. So she and Campion are start out as family, and then they become antagonists or enemies for a while, and then eventually reunite. And so many secrets and scars, like I talked about. There was the whole secret baby. She doesn't. The mother actually ends up blowing up a spaceship and taking all the children, but she doesn't tell anybody that she was the one who caused it to crash, so that she will basically have more offspring. The scars of um, the all those Campion losing his siblings and mother losing her siblings. There's another interesting parallel in this story with motherhood and parenting. Besides the young woman I mentioned, there's another woman in here who assumes a different identity. She undergoes basically plastic surgery as a way to get on a ship, and she doesn't realize. She has a husband too who undergoes the same thing. They don't realize till they get on the ship that they had an 8-year-old son, that the couple that they're impersonating had an 8-year-old son. And so all of a sudden there become these sudden, it's basically like a sudden baby situation. And so this woman very um, really takes to heart her responsibilities of being a parent and really comes to care and nurture and protect this child that she's inherited in a way so much so that he realizes, they aren't his real parents because his real parents never had that much interest in him. So it's a really interesting series of what great science fiction can do, I think, because it's on this alien hostile planet with kind of interesting, cool creatures running around, and yet dealing with very basic human emotions and human relationships, and complicated too, in terms of how families are functioning. So this is just a reminder that really that's why tropes are so powerful, is because they are relationships. And when we see, like when we talk about with the orphan, that's what's powerful in the orphan relationships are what's lacking. Those lacks are what's driving that. And then when we were just talking about the mothers and their children, we can just see how by twisting those a little bit, we can create all kinds of conflict. We can create, people who aren't supposed to be nurturers into nurturers, people who are supposed to be nurturers who don't feel nurturing, and so on with like protection and like identity as I talked about. So I just think it's really interesting. and and I've enjoyed thinking about that. So this is basically just when we're working with tropes, it's something to think about in terms of how can I take the tropes that I'm thinking of with my character and how can I twist them? And by twist them, it's just kind of realizing what the trope, what the power is in that trope, what it really stands for, what the relationship is about, and how I can use parts of it, and then I can kind of mold it or twist it to fit to my story. And I'm getting to the end of my talk. I just wanted to put I this is a new book that I read that has fantastic relationships with mothers and and her daughters, and called Sundial but by Catriona Ward. And so I highly recommend it if you guys are interested in any of the stuff I'm talking about. It's dark, it's creepy, it's great writing. Um, and if you read it, email me and let me know so we can talk about it because I'm super excited about it. Um, but it's another example of like very complex characters in the whole mother-child relationship. And my books are finally in, so I'm going to start shipping this week. Thank you for all your patience. I'm super excited to be getting the hard copy out to all the domestic backers. Um, this was my first time doing this talk and was really fun to think about and spend time on it. But let me know if you have any questions or any things you don't understand, to send me an email. It's when I do something for the first time, there's always stuff that comes up later and things that I haven't thought about. So I would love to hear more about that from you guys.